Hi, this is Mark Hopkins. Welcome back to another episode of Unsung. Today I'm interviewing Frank Childs, and I've known Frank. Frank is a friend of a friend of a friend, husband of a friend of a friend or something. And I've probably known him for a couple decades now, at least. Yep. And Frank has a much better voice than I do, and I'm trying not to be intimidated by his great radio voice.
Oh, please, you do fine.
Because Frank did radio for a long time in this market. I used to hear him on the radio late at night. I would, when I was sad and lost in love, I would tune into his show to level out my sadness. It was, I don't want to say smooth jazz because that's the kind of thing that gets you punched, but it was jazz, and
smooth jazz.
Oh, okay, you're owning it. Okay.
I did. Hey, I was at that particular radio station for 16 years.
Yeah, and right after you left, they changed the format, didn't they, or something like that?
They did, and then it was picked up again by Greater Media, and I went over there for about a year, and then that was it. It was, more viable to do it another way. They could make more money doing it a different way.
And that's when radio got ruined, when they started just selling it out more and more.
Well, it happened It happened longer. It was a lot longer than that. Radio began to fall apart probably the first decade of 2000, maybe 2005, 2006, 2007. By that time, things were really beginning to go downhill with terrestrial radio, terrestrial television, print media. People were getting their information and their music from different sources. They were getting it from the computer, their iPods, the internet when it blew up. That's where everyone got all of their data, all their information from. So radio was just basically beginning to phase out. And the company I worked for developed a system that actually was like the predecessor of automated radio, which used to be done on a reel-to-reel tapes, and the music would be put down, the disc jockey would be doing their thing. Well, this is all done digitally on a computer, and the idea was, because Clear Channel was such a big, am I allowed to say Clear Channel? Because the company, because the company I worked for was such a big company, and they had people in large and major markets, that were being paid very well. And they had hundreds of stations in medium and small markets, mostly medium markets. So they had the idea that if they could develop this way of communicating from station to station, they could hire me, who is at the time was a veteran disc jockey, in a major market, Philadelphia. And I was doing work in other markets as well, San Francisco, New York, Chicago. And they could hire me to actually sit in my studio in Philadelphia and do my show and do it accurately from a studio. And I could do it in advance, and it would go to some small market. And it's pretty simple. I mean, the music would be programmed by the music director. The program director would put all the other information in. All the recorded bits would automatically be put into this machine. And they called it Profit, by the way. And then the disc jockey would have a place where they could record their voiceover. And they would fax me the logs, and I would get the logs, and it would tell me the commercials that are being played. I would have the temperature, the weather report. If we were doing a remote somewhere, I'd be saying, hey, make sure you head out to the Astrodome for whatever. I mean, I could do that from Philadelphia, and I might be the afternoon guy in Tucson, Arizona, which I was. The midday guy in Madison, Wisconsin. They would hire me for $400 a month. It would take me about an hour to I'm sorry, it would take me about a half hour to do an entire show. So a half hour out of my day, 5 days a week, I could make a little bit of money. The company would fire their afternoon person or their morning drive person, and who was part of the startup, part of the. I always look at baseball as the analogy. They're the farm league, the small markets. I started in small markets. That's how you learn your craft. There were no more small markets because it could be done by a major market voice electronically. I know I'm taking up a lot of time, but
go ahead.
But that's what really happened with radio, and from there on, it spiraled downhill. And if you listen to radio, if you're older and you've listened to radio for many years, and you listened to radio 20 years ago, and you listen to radio today, it's not so much the quality of the music. Of course, the music changes, but it's changed continuously, for as long as there's been music. It's the programming aspect of it. It's all very canned, very commercial. There's not a lot of personality, not a lot of life in radio, which is sad because I got into it because of that particular reason. I wanted to be part of a music scene. I wanted to be part of that whole scene and go to the concerts and understand it and promote it and, that kind of thing. And I did, and I was able to do it for many years, but radio has changed over the years. And anyway, so there you go. That's my little history of radio. I finally got out of it. And when I finally retired after 30 years of being in the business, I was a corporate guy by that point, still doing a radio show every day, live on the air. My last recorded interview had been done the night before with Brenda Russell. She had a brand new album that was coming out. It was being released on the following Tuesday, which was release day, and I had done it on like a Thursday, and on Friday they fired everybody. And so my Brenda Russell interview never went on the air, But from that point on, I became a cook, and there you go.
I think it's interesting because I don't blame, like you talked about the big companies and everything. I don't blame them as much in radio as I do in some industries, because I think to a degree they were forced by, like when you said people got control of the music in a different way on their iPods and stuff. It started to be their own program directors, for better or for worse. And I think that I know that you think that you just want to hear the music you like. And that's not necessarily true, because you never get introduced to anything new. And that's what the station does. And it gets very narrow-minded. And you think you want that loop of, Huey Lewis or Motown or whatever. But there's a point where you want something mixed in. There was a stage in my life when I just wanted to listen to that music. And I'm at a point where I want to hear something slightly different. And you're not getting that now, because you're getting – I tell people all the time, I see records back in the store. And I tell people all the time that the amount that went into album art and the creativity and the putting together of an entire story that was lost on a generation or two, that's now trying to come back. The artist meant for you to play the album in a specific order and then flip it over and then play the other side. He didn't mean for you to hear the story by just pulling out the funny parts that you like. He wanted you to hear the entire story. And I think we lost something when we dissected everything and we just went with what we liked.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think that every generation has that same problem, especially in radio, since radio is, it's 100 years old. It's older than that, but commercial radio, began in Pittsburgh in the early 1920s. And, the thing is, it changed, I mean, at one point, radio was all the entertainment we had, all the entertainment that was in America, anywhere, really. And so people listened to it for lots of reasons. They listened to it for the music. They listened to it for the stories, all the serials that became television series, that became movies, that, I mean, I think every generation as technology has moved on, we've grown to accept and to collect information in different ways, and that's the same thing with music and radio. It was slanted a certain way. It was slanted a certain way. I mean, when I first got into radio, there was only a few different types of radio. There was CHR radio, that was contemporary hit radio. There was MOR, which was middle of the road, which was, the Barbra Streisands to the whatever, that kind of thing. There was AC, which was adult contemporary. And there was Top 40 or pop radio, which was Top 40. And then there was AOR, which was album-oriented rock. And that was really the meat of it. There was R&B, but it was still kind of classified as, it was R&B, but it was sort of classified. Well, that's a whole different story. I mean, you think about the great, black artists, the Jimi Hendrix, the Stevie Wonders. These guys were played on rock radio. They were played on pop radio, and they were never looked at as a great black guitar player. It was just a great guitar player, and it's interesting how it's changed. But then radio fragmented. It became new age. It became new wave. It became new age. It became so many different things. There's so many different categories, and that sort of isolates the music. You don't get that variety of music anymore, and that narrows the listening field as well. Unless you can find a good radio station that can play a lot of things, which is a lot of public radio stations or college-oriented radio stations, which I listen to. I mean, we have a couple of great stations in the area that I've listened to that do supply a lot of great, content. And
why do you think music is important?
Why do I think music's important? I think music's a universal language. I've always believed that since I was a little kid. I've always believed music was it was inspirational. It made you feel good. It made you feel sad. It made you feel somber. If you were sad, it kind of enveloped you in certain songs would envelop you in that kind of blanket that kind of gave you support and comfort. I mean, that's what it was for me. I can tell you my very first memory of music, true music that really affected me. And I was probably about 8 years old. And I remember it pretty vividly. My mother loved music. My father never listened to music. Not until he got older. And at one point I worked at a Howdy station. I was a country disc jockey. And he loved country music at that point. So he would listen to country music. But my mom loved music. So she would do housework and she would dance and sing and, the whole routine. But she loved jazz as well. And I'll never forget. I was walking, it was like summertime. I was walking through the house. She pulled me into the living room. She goes, I want you to listen to this song. This song is going to be really important to you one day. It is the coolest song you'll ever hear. And she played Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. And Paul Desmond on saxophone, and that classic, Take 5. And I listen to that song, and every time I hear it, even to this day, 50 something years later, I still get that same feeling and that same warm comfort when I listen to music. And I believe that it's a comfort to everybody. And no matter what language it's in, or even what format it's in, it comforts people to a point where I believe it comforts people. I believe it gives people hope. It gives people, a satisfaction in a daily, a daily nothing life.
I think it bridges gaps and it makes a common ground. It makes it relatable. I think it's the sound of emotion in some ways. And I've always said that there's three things that people think they understand but don't understand, in my opinion. And the three things are, four: jazz, comedy, religion, and women.
Well, this is true. We've tried, though.
We've tried. And when we think we've got it down, we get smacked in the head by new knowledge because they're complicated topics. And
they're very complicated.
And,
sure.
and jazz, I have such a bad palate in jazz because I want to completely understand something I'm learning, and I don't think I have enough years left in me to understand jazz.
Well, jazz is very complicated.
I think you have to live it.
Well, I had I was in the world of smooth jazz for 16 years. I had the opportunity to interview Ken Burns, and he did a series on public television called Jazz, and it was the history of jazz from the beginning. It's basically its roots in America, in New Orleans, which is where jazz really began, in an area called the Congo Square, which is where they would gather and play jazz music, brass instruments and wind instruments and that. But I'm sorry, I lost complete thought of what I was speaking of.
Interviewing Ken Burns about jazz.
Ken Burns. I apologize. I don't know why. Maybe because it's late and I haven't had my cookies and milk yet. I don't know. Okay, so I was interviewing Ken Burns, and I think he was reluctant to talk to me because I was with a smooth jazz station, because he was very against it. Very much against it. And jazz started from the beginning in his documentary, and it went to the mid 80s or early 80s. I think when Bitches Brew was Miles Davis's, one of his standard, one of his great records was done. It was kind of a fusion record. It was done in the early 80s. I believe it was the early 80s. That was about when he stopped talking about how the jazz music had progressed, but it still had progressed. And so I asked him that. I said, what is it you have against, smooth jazz? And it was an interesting answer he gave me. He said, if somebody listens to your station and hears Kenny G, and they hear it and they like the sound of it, it's melodic, it makes them feel nice, and they like the sound of it. Now, if that leads them to a David Sanborn or a Grover Washington Jr., something a little more complicated, but a little more, same thing, kind of, that. And if that eventually leads you to a John Coltrane, or to that, then he says music has done its job. That's what it's for. It leads you to other pieces of music and other types of music. And if you are a music person and love music, it's true. And you do. I've been a music person my whole life. I can't even imagine what life would be like without music.
Well, that's an amazing thing you just said that he said, that
mm-hmm.
you said that he said, that maybe the really important things in life are supposed to lead you to other important things and not just stop right at that experience. And maybe that's the way we differentiate. We may have accidentally late night figured out life right here.
No, but you're right. That's very true. I mean, he's telling you how something in music will lead to something else in music. And yes, I can see that. That is a great way of climbing the ladder and of knowledge to learn about music. But you're right about it being able to, transcend to other things. It could lead to other things. It could lead to, some kind of passion you might have, or
your true knowledge is supposed to go somewhere. It's not supposed to stop at one thing. And we can thank Mr. Burns for that. And we managed to say it in under 40 hours.
This is true. This is true.
He would have had fade-ins and fade-outs and.
I do must admit there was a lot of great music. So
you went from music to cooking, both passions,
right?
And you make. I've used your sauces to bribe people.
Yeah.
You make great stuff. How do you feel that they're both passions? Do you feel that?
Oh, big time. They're I'm really, really lucky. I've been lucky to be involved in two different businesses, two different ventures that I've enjoyed, immensely. They've meant a lot to me. Radio was everything to me. And right out of college, that was what I did. I went right into radio and I spent 30 years in it. And when I got out, I had no regrets, but I didn't want to continue on with it because I didn't feel it was something I become sour on it because of the corporate stuff. And I'd been part of that world for a little while and a long while, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I started doing I started doing freelance work for a couple of universities, doing audio work for them. And a buddy of mine in the city here, he had a little water ice stand. And he said he knew I cooked. He knew I was a barbecue guy. And he said, "Hey, man, if I put a grill in, will you come cook for me during the summertime?" And I said, "Sure, what the hell?" So I went to work for him. And like I tell everybody, I went from making, $100,000 a year to making $10 an hour under the table, but I was happier than I was so happy, and that's how that started. And for me, I was very lucky because I'm a barbecue guy, and I was looking around, and we had a place in the back, and I said, "Can I bring a smoker in?" And they told me, "Sure, no problem." And we had it inspected, and the fire chief came out and said, "Go for it." And I fired it up, and I used to do pulled pork. We never advertised, and I would sell it out every single day. And, and that led to me and, cooking, and it was great. And I got picked up by a lot of places. I was written up in a couple of newspapers and a couple of magazines, and I was invited to come on a couple of radio shows. And I didn't, I wasn't interested because I had enough of radio, but it was okay. I didn't mind. And I went to work for a catering company, a very big catering company here in Philadelphia. And they were very nice to me, very good to me. And they sent me to school, and I got certified in a number of different, areas of culinary arts. And then I got real sick, and I didn't have any medical insurance. Thank you, America. And so all my savings was basically spent on making me well and letting me live. I have no regrets, though. But because of that, I needed a job with insurance, and my exec at the catering company said that she knew somebody at another big company, Aramark. And the person was a recruiter, and she said, "It won't be as fun, won't be as creative, but they have really good medical insurance." And that's how it happened. But it happened all within about a week, because within a week, I was hired to do barbecue at LaSalle University. And that was in beginning of 2013. So I've been there for 7 years now. But it's a passion.
Funny how when you're younger,
it's a real passion. So
when you're younger, it's money in the job, and then as you get older, you put less value on insurance as you're younger. You don't care at all. What's that? I don't need that. Why do you need that? When you get older, you really work for insurance. You work for that peace of mind and that protection. You just want to keep the lights on and not have your body found by cats.
That's true. You're right. You're absolutely right. We were lucky because we always had insurance. When I worked, I always carried the insurance for us. And when I retired out of radio, my wife carried the insurance for us. And it was just before Christmas. And they dropped all family insurance. So I was out of insurance. And within about a month, I was diagnosed. And because I was uninsured at that point. And it was just bad timing. But hey, I have no regrets, I mean,
it's amazing to me that these companies do these things right before Christmas. I see a lot of companies do these heartless cuts. And I'm not saying that it's still not heartless, but it'd be something different if you waited till December 26th or December 27th.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it affected many, many families. And so.
What would you say to somebody or we're almost near the end of our half hour, believe it or not, and we can do a little after show. What would it take to get you back into radio?
Well, for me, it would have to be the creative part of it, because that was the part that I loved the most. It was the part that I excelled at the most. I was a production director. I was an imaging director. I imaged stations. I've been a music director. I've been a program director. I've done long form. I've done everything that can be done in radio. I've done, from the very beginning, spinning the wax, spinning actual albums to playing off a computer, So what would get me back into it? I don't know. Maybe something creative. If I could do it and be creative, in a way where I wouldn't be impeded, then yeah, by all means, that's what would get me interested in maybe going back.
What's a cheap way that somebody who's not good at cooking can make their food taste better?
Seasoning. Learn all about your seasonings. That's the most important part. I make sauces and rubs, and I make all kinds of rubs. And if you want to learn about how to flavor food, you can boil chicken, fry chicken. Well, not fry, but you can boil chicken, poach chicken, grilled chicken, whatever. It's all going to taste about the same. You put a spice on it, and it's going to change the profile of it, and that's what you want. So learn your spices.
What would you say to someone that considers mayonnaise a seasoning?
I would say that they're crazy. It's not a seasoning. It's almost a mother sauce, and it is a sauce. So, but you're right. You know what? I know people like that. So, and we might be talking about the same one.
Yeah, there are some people that we seem to be in this odd time seasoning wise, where there's this Stargate where there are people who do not season and there are people that over season, but it's so few that get it right. And as I've gotten older, I want everything on the side. I almost want my food in kit form, when I get it.
No, I understand because of that exact reason. I mean, this is one of the killers of a lot of restaurants, a lot of food places, a lot of people that are in the food business. It's consistency. You find a good product, you have a good recipe for that product, and that's it. It's all about consistency. And if you can maintain that consistency, then you're good. If you can't find it, then give it up. Go to something else. And if you and that's also the killer of most restaurants. If you go to a restaurant 20 times and it's great every single time, and you go that 21st time and it's not good, most of the time you'll never go back. And, it's unfortunate, but that happens more than not. So.
And one of the things that I would, you get older, your taste change it on. You're absolutely right. It's consistency because you have expectations and you go to a place to have them met. You don't want to change or surprise or whatever. And, but it's interesting. You've been doing some stuff on Instagram with short recipes and stuff.
I have.
In the midst of this crisis, which I'm hoping that this thing pushes on a little bit of creativity in people as they're.
I hope so. I think it does.
Well, look, we're talking. We put this.
We're talking. Absolutely. Here's a great example. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of this live streaming, and there was a special that was on television about music, and it was these big artists at their homes doing music. It was great. Elton John was the host of it. It was very cool, and all these different things that you can do. And people are getting more creative about it, and it's great that they're doing that. Joy, my wife, she got a recipe on how to make bagels with 2 ingredients, no yeast, no proofing, and that's it. 2 ingredients in the oven, and less than 40 minutes later, you've got bagels. I filmed her doing it. So because I've been doing cheap eats, and the bagels were amazing. And so she posted it on her Facebook, and all of a sudden it's like we've got dozens of people, friends that she hasn't heard from everywhere, sending her pictures of the bagels that they made from the video, and it's great. So I'm trying to do a little video every day of some cheap eats, just for fun and to show people that, you can do a lot. It's you don't have to. Although I did do a really good cheap eats yesterday. I did a dollar store box of macaroni and cheese and a can of chili. And the whole meal cost me about a little less than $2. And I told a little story as I made it, and I made it like it's really fast. I think it's only about a minute and a half long. And I mean, I turned the can up and let it plop in the saucepan. I mean, that kind of thing. But I told the story about it because as odd as it looks and as gross as it looks, it's really, really good. And I learned that from a trip I went to in Cleveland. A buddy of mine took me to a diner, and they called it Skyline Chili, and they made chili, and they put it over a homemade macaroni and cheese, and it was so good. When I was really poor, I remember that's what I would get, and that's what I would live on.
Well, we're out of time. We'll take a break and talk with Frank Childs. We're going to do a little bit of after show. And thank you, Frank. And we'll be right back. And I'm just going to, right here, Russell will cut it. Russell, cut it here, right here. and then I will go. Well, I'm back with Frank Childs. And we're talking about life, cooking, and music. Frank,
yes.
How is music and cooking similar?
I think it's very similar. I wrote a book that has never been published, but it's something I've thought about. I think it's pretty good. It's a cookbook, but everybody's got a cookbook. I call it "How to Get Into a Girl's Pants Through Her Stomach." And it's basically a cooking guide for bachelors. And the way I did it was I took the pictures of everything, but the way I explained it was I explained all your ingredients, get them all together. I explained, what you're going to need to do. Then I explained how to cook everything at a certain time so it all comes out at the same exact time. So all your food is hot. And then, depending on the date, I give suggestions of music because I was in music for such a long time. I gave suggestions of music on how to set the mood if you're going to bring a girl over and you're going to do like grilled salmon. You want to do a little Luther, or something like that. So I would, yeah, and I could see it. I could see music that went with food, and I don't want to be stereotypical, but it's like when I have Mexican food, I don't really think of Mexican music. I usually think of surf music because I grew up in Southern California in a surf culture, and we ate a lot of Mexican food because Mexican food in Southern California was much like Italian food, or there's a cheesesteak place on every corner, in the Northeast, in Philadelphia especially. In Southern California there was a taqueria at every place. You can go in and get tacos, whatever. And, so I grew up with that, but I grew up in Huntington Beach and I was a surfer. And so I grew up with the surf culture and I listened to a lot of that music. So when I'm eating Mexican food, I'm thinking that music. And for me, if I'm listening to the music live and I'm eating the food, it's like, I'm good.
Isn't it amazing how smell and sound can take you back to a memory, to a place?
Oh, absolutely.
In your life.
I think it's one of the great senses we have is especially smell and taste. I mean, you can go for years and years just eating your normal food, and then all of a sudden you eat something that you haven't had in a long time, or you can't remember ever having, or maybe somebody makes something and you're not really sure, but you taste it, and all of a sudden there's some kind of a flavor profile that hits you, and it's like, oh my God. My mother made this, or this brings me back to when I was like 14 years old and I had a crush on Mary Lou next door. I mean, or something like that. And absolutely, food, smells trigger memories. And I think that that's a beautiful thing about food. One of the great things about food. I've always been a very big advocate for food. I'm a feeder. I mean, I enjoy eating, but I'm a feeder. I love to feed people. I want to give people food all the time. It's just in my nature. And
there's my brother has been trying to recreate a recipe for iced tea, something simple. We got a certain iced tea as we were growing up, and the woman that watched us during the summer, that raised my dad, that helped my grandmother along with the family, she was a stern taskmaster. We got our meal, we got our one glass of iced tea, and we didn't waste it. And if you didn't eat what you didn't eat for dinner became breakfast, and it was very rigid. Liver for breakfast was not good, but this iced tea was great. Yeah, liver for breakfast, and 2-day-old liver for breakfast. It was just, she was rough. and you got this iced tea, and it was the best iced tea in the world. My brother's been trying to recreate it for years, for decades, and he's gotten it down to he thinks that what it was the iron content in the water that gave
maybe. Yeah.
He's been trying to create it like a gallon of iced tea at a time for like 40 years.
Oh, my God. But that's all. Do you remember the name brand, or was there a name brand?
No, it was either tea bags or leaves, and there was fresh mint in it, and it was just it's
boiled or sun.
It was boiled. It was boiled.
Yeah.
But I can taste hints of it when he's getting close, just a hint of it. And I think it is something like the iron and the mint. And it's amazing how you cannot remember where you parked your truck, but a hint of a taste or a sound of a song can take you back to a place as clear as we're talking to each other.
Yeah, every single time. I mean, certain, everything we do, certain actions that we have, certain things that we do, we always go back to a certain memory. At least I do. I mean, even today, it's like, or, there are certain things that I'll do, like in the kitchen. My mother was a chef, for 50 years. And I learned a lot from her. I learned almost everything from her. I watched her in the kitchen. And now I do things a lot like her. Or I'll say things like my dad said. It's just so interesting that we become that. Not so much we become our parents, but we become. It's the actions. Our actions are basically the same as as what we learned. That's how we learned it. We by doing it because our parents did it, or because somebody did it over and over.
Well, we become our parents. We got to find something to like about them because
you're right.
And there's no way of fighting it. Right. We fight it. Think
differently. For me, except for the long hair and tattoos, I guess I've become my dad.
Yeah, you got to find something to like about them because you do become them, and it's funny because I can think of music. I can remember when I was sick. I was sick for a while, and I was very sick, and I was confined to a bed for a while and everything. And there was Top 40 that was playing on the radio, and they would just put you in a room like a plant, and they'd put the radio on. And one of the things I found is that the songs that were on during that era, I can't listen to them because they remind me too much of that time.
Of course.
And because you hear them over and over on, depends on how tight the station is, but some stations will play the same song every couple hours,
More than that, yeah. Top 40 radio stations today, they have a power rotation, and their power rotation is usually like 4 to 6 songs, and they rotate 4 to 6 songs. Usually can do 12 songs in an hour, depending on commercial load and that. So you figure every half hour to 40 minutes, you're hearing the same song. And this is what Top 40 radio is. But that's the way it rotates in, and then it'll rotate out. It'll rotate out into like a recurrent where it'll get played, once every 4 hours instead, and then it'll finally go into a category where it'll play like, once a day in different day parts, that kind of thing. But in the beginning with Top 40 radio, in the old days and even now, if you listen to, what's Q102, they are a Top 40 radio station. But if you listen to it, the top songs will get played probably every 40 to 45 minutes. So,
who's an artist that you like that people would not think you like, that you're almost embarrassed to publicly admit it, or a song?
Well, all right. Let me tell you about something that that actually I've never invited you to one of them before, but you should come over and we should do this. We have this thing called a music exchange now. Several years ago, and I mean several years ago, I have friends, Christian and Robin, their boyfriend and girlfriend. And then there was Kelly and Stuart, and who are very close friends as well. So it would be the six of us, and we would gather, and then we'd gather at my house in my basement, which is really a converted bar and a music studio. So we'd go down there, and we'd play music, and we'd drink, and we'd eat, and I'd cook food, and we'd have a good time. It was a great night. We called it, well, it was just a great night, but we always got together. So I played all the music. It was my stereo. It was my house. I'm playing my music. And they all rebelled on me one day and said, no, we want to play a song. And it was like, all right, go ahead. I'll give you 10 minutes. Everybody go get a CD. You all got cars out front, or, there's a rack in the back of the music room that has 2,000 CDs. I'm sure you can find something. Go pick out a song. Everybody gets one song. So 10 minutes later, everybody shows back up at the bar, and they all have stacks of CDs. So we started, and one person played one song, one person played the next song. About the third song in, somebody rated it. Said, oh, man, I hate that song. I give it like a 1. And then somebody said, no, I give it like a 10. And we started rating them. Every round, we rate them. And it just became that. So the next time we got together, we called it a music exchange. Everybody brought music. And Stuart, who was a lawyer and a nerd, kept a diary and kept stats on everything. Every song we ever played, every rating we ever gave it. So at the end of the year, we could do a best of and a worst of. And but this was a way to gather. And the great thing about it was we were getting to know music that we never knew before. I have a really extensive knowledge of music. Complete, not by any means, but I've been around music my whole life, and I've done a lot of music, so I know a lot about music, but I'm not an expert on so many different things. So everybody had a style. Stuart, he loved long playing stuff, Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers. He wanted 20-minute songs. Went to Joy. Joy loved R&B, good solid R&B, Philly, sound. You went to Christian, and Christian loved ska. So all of his music was like 2 minutes long. And then we went to Robin, and Robin liked 80s only, 80s R&B, which is just weird. And then Kelly loved country music. So all of us had a different style of music, and I had everything, so I just put it. So it became a music exchange. And we've done this now for many, many years, where we would gather, and we still gather, and we'll do a theme. We'll say, your favorite, breakup song, your favorite love song, your favorite, what we were talking about, your favorite, guilty pleasure song. And so I remember when we did that round, and I had a guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure song was Cruel Summer by Bananarama. Let me move on, okay? Let me explain it to you. Let me give you a little explanation on this, okay? Back in the 80s, those wacky 80s, there was this girl. Her name was Sarah, and I became friends with her. We became very good friends. And she played music. She played bass for this band called Bananarama, and I went to their concert, and I had this like moment when they were playing Cruel Summer, and from that point on, it's always been my guilty pleasure.
Was it Sarah with an A or with an H at the end?
With an A.
Okay, because the ones with the H's, they're more dangerous of the two. Both are dangerous, but with the H at the end, they're more dangerous.
Yeah, I got you.
It's literally the word harassed almost spelled backwards. So it's a warning right in the name. It's a warning right in the name.
Well, it's kind of like, wordplay. It's like reconciliation. People that try to, reconciliate with, somebody. I always say it's got the word wreck in it. And it's got the word silly in it. So, I mean, come on. That should tell you everything.
I would not have picked Bananarama.
Okay, Smarty, what's your favorite? What's your guilty pleasure?
I would have to say it seems to all go under one artist, and it seems to be Cher.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which one, though?
The Shoop Shoop song. And so I figure if you can own up the Bananarama, I can own up the Shoop Shoop song.
There you go.
You got to be on an equal playing field. Yeah, it's something that you could come in and catch me singing at the right time, and if I saw another human being that could hear me singing it, I would instantly stop.
Well, see, this is the worst part because you know the song, so you know the words, and a lot of these songs, most people don't know the words except for like the chorus, and you'd be singing along, and people looking at you like you're singing to this song, and you're like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, and there's songs that I know the words to and the lyrics to that I could sing that are just burned into my mind. I mean, recently, Kenny Rogers passed away,
right?
And I was thinking about when I was growing up. One of my friends, their family had 3 albums. They had Abbey Road, the soundtrack to Bugsy Malone, which is highly underrated.
Okay.
Paul Williams.
I know it.
Paul Williams, Bugsy Malone, and the Gambler. And so we played those things on an old turntable to no end, and there isn't a drug or a government device that could remove the lyrics to The Gambler from my head. It's burned in there. And
it's so funny. That is so funny. I have a Kenny Rogers story. When I was in radio, first job I ever had was in Trenton, New Jersey, at a little AM radio station that we used to. We were right on the Delaware River. We were on the 7th floor, and we get records in from the record company, and we never played them. There'd be 45s, and we'd stand on the balcony and we'd chuck them into the Delaware River. We said if the Delaware River went dry right at that place, in Trenton, New Jersey, they're going to find thousands of records, because we would always, chuck them in. But anyway, my buddy, my roommate, the guy I started in radio with, John, his dad was a radio exec in St. Louis and worked for a big company called Gannett. Eventually became the president of Gannett for many years. But he was running the cluster of radio stations in St. Louis. And so one of the stations was a country station. So, we were making no money at all, and we were probably behind on our bills. And so in the dead of night, we packed everything up and just took off. And we headed to St. Louis. We left Philadelphia because we lived in the Northeast, and we just left. We left our apartment, left the furniture, everything. And they probably have my name somewhere, I'm sure. I'm on a list somewhere. But we got to St. Louis, and I went to work for the radio station as an engineer. I was doing basically production, and at the country station because it was just going on the air. You got to remember, it was like about 1980. So it was like Urban Cowboy, and all these radio stations were turning country, and all these country bars were, popping up everywhere. So anyway, Jay was his name. My friend's name was John. And so Jay and his wife, Carolyn, I knew them for many, many years. They were like a second family to me. I lived in their house. I've known them and their family for most of my life. And John was my best friend. And he sadly passed away a few years back, which is unfortunate. But we had left in the dead of night. We headed back to St. Louis. We're living in his basement. And one day his dad comes down the stairs and says, you guys got to take showers and get dressed. Because we live like trolls down there. And, and we're like, why? Well, we have guests coming over tonight. You're going to, have dinner with us. And we're like, oh, okay. And he looked at me and he goes, and Frank, you know how to cook. So you're going to cook the steaks. And I'm like, okay. And okay. So I'm in the kitchen preparing stuff. I go outside and I'm on the deck and I'm preparing the steaks. Guests arrive. They're talking. I'm hearing the voice and I'm thinking, I know this voice. And I turn around, and there he was. There's Kenny Rogers, just standing there. And they're just shooting the shit, just talking. And they're drinking a beer. They're all just drinking. And I'm thinking, whoa. I mean, I was freaked out. And I cooked his steak. And we sat down at the dinner table and we ate and we talked about all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was just, they talked most of it. I just sat there kind of dazed, and there you go. There's my.
What do you remember most about him from that dinner?
He was really gracious and he loved the steak. He kept complimenting me on how good it was. Oh my God, you did a great job. Oh, it's really good. He wanted it medium rare. It was perfect, done perfectly. Oh, perfectly done. Oh, I'm like, okay, great, good. We're going to go back down in the basement and smoke some more marijuana. No. So.
What?
Yeah. I can tell you about a ton of people I've met. I mean, I can, I have stories on a ton of people. I mean, not bad stories, just stories of when I met. Some people asked me when I was in radio, they always said, how come you don't have a camera in your studio? Because one of my jobs as a creative service director at the radio stations I've worked at was you do liners. If say Bon Jovi comes to town, and you're a rock station, and and they're going to do a concert and you're sponsoring it. Well, John Bon Jovi will come into the studio and it'll be you and him alone, and you'll talk to him like see he's working, I'm working. Here's some lines. Read these lines. Hey, when I'm in Houston, I listen to 93Q. Oh, whatever they want to say. I mean, and as long as they're promoting the radio station or whatever and their show or whatever. And so I got to know a ton of people, and it's really interesting because people always said, "Oh, it must have been so glamorous," and I'm thinking, no, it's a job, it's work, it's they're working, I'm working. We just happen to be in a business where a lot of people think it's very glamorous, and I guess it could be to a point to a lot of people. It's fun. I mean, I had sad times too, but I had lots of fun.
Who was one of the people that you wish you had the ability to spend more time with?
I'm sorry, what was going on? One more time.
Who was somebody you wish you had the ability to spend more time with?
I think probably my daughter. When I got married, when I was like 25 years old, 24 years old, something like that. I'd already been in the radio business, for a few years. And I didn't do what my ex-wife wanted me to do, which was basically be an English teacher, teach at her high school, have a house with 2.5 kids, 3 doors down from her mother. I mean, that kind of thing. That was her life. That's what she wanted. And I went to school. I studied English, and I mean, that's what I was going to do, so I was just following a plan until I got stuck in radio, and then I became, a radio person. So, I'm sorry. I went off subject, and I kind of lost my train of thought.
No. Person that you wish you had more time with.
So anyway, one of the great things that happened was, we had a baby, and Elena is the apple of my eye. Now she's in her 30s and she just had a baby. So I'm a granddad for I'm so happy about that. Baby was born just before Christmas, and I'm very excited about that. But because we divorced when she was about 3 years old, and I made the choice of continuing in radio, and she wanted to go back and live with her mom, and she did. And I found out later that there was more to it. There was, Uncle Larry was in the picture. And I'm like, who the heck is Uncle Larry? Well, that was the guy she ended up marrying. But anyway, but it was my daughter. Now we had we weren't in the age of emails. We weren't in the age of cell phones. So I had the world's largest telephone bills. I called her all the time. I talked to her all the time. I wrote her letters. When there was a parent-teacher day, I would go there. When she was in plays, I would go there. I made a real point of being in her life. And then when she got to be about, I think she was about 8 years old, 9 years old, she started coming to me. And I got to spend summers with her, which was great. But I didn't get to spend like the times with her that I really enjoyed, which was, when she was first developing, the first few years was, dressing and food and stories and playing and, and understanding and wondering about things. and being there for her for that. Now, I was doing the same thing, but I was doing it long distance. So yeah, that would be the one person in my life, that I have regrets about not being close to or closer to.
But everybody has a version of that, and then they make it up by being an awesome grandparent, and they're such a good grandparent that they make the parents look like they're the uncool ones. You get it better the second round because it's more fun to be a grandparent.
No, you're right. That's absolutely true. It's unfortunate we're so far away because it's and of course our situation right now, which I hope will eventually will change, and it will, but. Yeah, it is. It's because we can give them back. We don't have to keep them when they get bad. We just give them back.
Right. It's like animals at the zoo versus owning them. You can walk out and clean up the mess. And one of the things about this circumstance is that we're all equally. There's only two distances. You're either right there with somebody or you're connected digitally. There's no middle ground anymore because of the circumstances.
Because of the circumstances, yeah.
Remember those days when you would have a $300 or $400 phone bill? You got me thinking about that and how we would just spend so much money. You'd call at the middle of the night because you had friends out of the area, and everything was amazing. How much the phone bills were.
Wait, I lived in Southern California. I grew up there. My brother, my younger brother, he was about was he like 5 years younger than I was. He always had girlfriends, lots of girlfriends, but they lived all over. And when you lived where we lived, there was only a certain area where you could actually make a local phone call. And and we were in Orange County. So he would always, it was always the 714 area code. And he always dated girls that were in the 215 area code, which was Los Angeles County. And it would be long distance, and they would be on the phone for hours and hours. But I remember my dad came to him and said, "What's her number?" Because I guess they could have put him. He was able to put her number on some kind of weird list, and it wouldn't cost as much. It would still cost. It wouldn't cost as much. But I remember once there was a bill that was so astronomical. I couldn't tell you how much it was, but it was so much. My dad blew a gasket. Oh my God, he was hot. It was rough.
It was a big deal balancing out, when you would call somebody and how much money you had to budget your phone calls to friends out of the area. And even the phone bills are outrageous now. I think the cost of the phones are outrageous. They do save money. If you have friends and you're a talker, this whole digital thing is great because it enables you to keep in touch with people. But it's not as special now. It's not as special, just like pictures aren't as special as they used to be because they're too easy. And music isn't as special because it's too easy. I can start it. I can stop it when I want to. We live in this on-demand world where it's not as special. I get teased all the time because on Sunday nights I have to be in so that I can watch Columbo. And it's like my brother says, why don't you just record it? I say, well, I like to watch it live. And he just shakes his head and walks away, I don't like to DVR things. I believe you're supposed to be there when it's on, or you don't watch it. You don't watch it, right. And I think that whole DVR mindset is part of the problem, is that it's an on-demand world.
Yeah, we're even worse now. It's, what they call, and of course this is going to happen a lot. You talk about an obesity problem, that's a whole different subject for you. The obesity problem is about to get out of hand, I believe, because of something called binge watching. And since we're all confined to our house, and now we have Netflix and Hulu and Prime and all these different platforms where we can watch everything from, that's what's going to happen. Everyone's going to sit around and watch everything and binge watch a series. It's like, hey man, did you see Breaking Bad? And I'm like, yeah, I saw like the first 3 episodes. It's pretty good. I go, oh yeah, that's all you've seen? I go, yeah. Oh, I watched the whole series, last weekend. And it's like, God, but I understand that because what are we doing now? We're looking to waste time, basically.
Well, I binge watched when I was sick. That's when I was introduced to it. I think that's the time to do it. But as far as doing it regularly, I think it ruins something because I think that you're supposed to watch and then you're supposed to discuss the episode and you're supposed to wait and your mind's supposed to think what's going to happen next and come up with something. I don't think you're supposed to keep eating it like food pellets back to back to back. I think you ruin your palate.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's get more primitive than that. I mean, reading. Nobody reads anymore either, but it's the same thing. Reading is very compelling. When you're reading a story, it's like, I mean, for me, the imagery is all there, and it gets your mind going creatively, just like watching a show like in real time. You're watching it happen, even though it's been pre-recorded. You're watching it happen. You don't have any preconceived notion, or spoiler alerts or whatever. There's something about watching everything in real time. I've always loved to be able to watch everything in real time.
How are you on radio being called theater of the mind? Where are you at on that?
See, I love it. And I'll tell you why I love it. But that's not what radio is. Radio is not theater of the mind, and it hasn't been theater of the mind for many years. Theater of the mind is more theater of the mind than most radio, because we're talking to each other. So people are trying to imagine what we look like, and and we're telling stories, so they're seeing their own imagery of what the stories are possibly what they are. So I mean, anyway, I don't know.
What are you listening to? What's the last new thing that you've heard musically that you liked?
Jason Isbell's latest album. It's called Nashville.
Okay.
Jason Isbell is an alt country artist. Something I really enjoy. Alt country is kind of music that it's not country, but it is country. It's not country rock, but it is country rock. It's not Americana or folk, but it is Americana and folk. It's difficult to explain it. I mean, there are core artists that basically define what it is. The John Prines, the Steve Earles, the John Hyatts of the world. But there's a lot of new artists that are out there, and I've been listening to a lot of new artists. And Jason Isbell's been around for a while. I actually noticed him many years ago when he was playing in a band called Drive By Truckers, another great alt country band. Very diverse. Very political in the way they phrase their songs. Not political in a bad way, political in a way of their southern roots, and they love their southern roots, but it's not in any way racist or anything like that. It's just it's southern rock, really. But I've always enjoyed the music. But anyway, Jason Isbell, I've had a chance to see him live, and he's amazing, and I think he's one of the finest songwriters that are out there today. There are a lot of, I think, really talented people that are out there. And I try to listen to, as much as I can. I try to listen to as much new music as I can. Difficult a lot of times, because there is so much that sounds the same, which it's the way it's been forever. And every format's that way. And, I mean, it's like we always said, if you love a style of music, if you love rap, okay, there's going to be the cream of the crop, the best that's going to rise to the top. It's going to cross all boundaries. It's going to be well produced. It's going to be well written. It's going to be, there's going to be a message there. It's going to be, done really well. So when you're listening to it, I mean, you understand it, you feel it. And then there's going to be the mediocre stuff that'll get played, and people will hear it, but, it's okay, but it's not, that great stuff. And then there's always that bottom part that's just a bunch of crap. And that's really what it is. But that's what all music is. Country music's the same way. There's the cream, there's the middle, and there's the bottom. And it doesn't matter what style of music. It can be hard rock. It's the same way. Every style of music has that. And, and I think that we live in a society where it's become more and more. Anybody could here's a terrible example. A terrible example. I play in a band. I play harmonica. I'm the sound guy. I do sound and I do setup and that. And I've been playing with them for many years. I put the band together. We're actually going to be doing a live stream on Facebook this coming Saturday. All in isolation, of course, but we're going to set it up so we're going to do the live stream. Anyway, I don't know. I'm sorry. I keep losing my thought. I guess it's because it's 1:00 in the morning. We were talking about
new music that you liked, and you were talking about the band you're in.
Oh, I thought we were talking about music and the recording of music. That's what it was. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So anyway, so the band is great. They've been around for many years now. They have a great following. They're very popular. And I'm very proud to be part of it and to be, the person that basically put it together and did most of their promotion in the very beginning. So, one of the things that I wanted them to do was, to come up with original music because they're very powerful musicians and the music's powerful, but they're playing covers. So they really couldn't do a whole lot of originals. Well, I'm a writer, so I write, stories mostly, but I write bios and poetry and all kinds of stuff. So last year I decided I was going to write some poems, just observational poems, but I was going to write them in a lyrical way so it could be phrased in a song if you had a melody to go along with it. And I told Andrew about it. Andrew looked at some of the words, and I wrote probably 50 songs. So he looked at them, he thought some of them were great. And I'm like, let's get together and do it. But we didn't have a singer. And he had a lot going on. He's the CFO of a big company, in Center City. And so, his time was limited as well. So I thought, okay, well, I'm really good at producing. And I worked for a hip hop station here for a long time. One of the stations I worked for was Power 99. I did all the beats for a lot of the jocks that, worked there when I worked there. And so I knew how to do this. And so I thought I'll just put together some music. And that's what I did. I know a little bit of piano. So I played the piano. I sampled my drums and I play a little guitar, but not a lot, but a little bit of guitar. And the thing is I can play 4 bars and then I can loop those 4 bars. And I can lay a bass line down on top of it. So I have a piece of music. I have no singer. So I sang it. So I've actually done that. And the point I'm trying to make is we live in a world where for less than $1,000, you can get all the software, a good microphone, and, if you know how to sample music or play music, you can produce a piece of music, put it on Spotify. You can put it on iTunes. I mean, you can put it on Amazon. I mean, there's a ton of this stuff. So everybody's a musician. Everybody's a performer. So they're recording all this music, and most of it's really bad.
Well, that's the problem. When we got this creativity to do this, everybody becomes a producer. But we need editors because we don't have the time to go through everything. We need people out there sorting the wheat from the chaff. Right. Because we're overwhelmed and we may not see that thing that you put up because there's a million things on top of it. With all the instruments in the band, who is the person in the band that can fake it more than any other instrument and get by? Who's the guy that can fake it? Which instrument can just, the guitar guy really can't fake it. No. He's got to deliver. I'm not talking about the tambourine player or the cowbell player. I mean, a player like that. But I mean, you can't get away with. I mean, I've listened through too many soundboards. Drums are always mic'd. The guitar, the bass, harmonica guy fake it a little more than the others.
You can't really just do it. I mean, unless you're Milli Vanilli and you're putting a track up there. And that's happened. And I've seen it happen to other bands as well, where a track has gone up and it's failed in the middle. And they're just standing there oh, I'm naked. Or, that's the way they feel probably, I mean, it's terrible.
What about the harmonica player? Can a harmonica player fake it a little more than the others if he's having an off day?
Yeah, I think that, because I'm not a musician, but I do play harmonica. That's what I play, But am I John Popper? No. Am I Toots Thielman? Am I Sonny Boy Williamson? No. I'm not great at it. I'm good at it. I'm passable at it. I know the keys and I can play along, and I can do a little solo work, but I'm not an expert at it.
But are you
but can I fake it? Well, it's hard to fake it because if you hit a bad note and everybody else is, in the right area and you hit a bad note, you're mic'd and because it's a reed instrument, it's got that pitch to it that cuts through everything. Everybody hears the bad note. So I try to be as conservative as possible and play within my range. That's the best I can do.
The harmonica player had more room for stumbling than some of the other players,
I don't know. I don't know if anybody really has a way of, or has an easier way of stumbling. I mean, I really don't. Everybody's going to play their part. If you want a good recording, if you want a good sound, you've got to have everybody playing their part. Maybe the singer. That's it. Yeah, it's the singer that slacks off. That's what I always say to Joe. That's the singer in our band. He hates rock and roll. He hates friendship, and so.
I think the last new group that I've listened to that I've liked is Dawes. I like Dawes, and
wow.
And I discovered them on one of the things I do like about the music services is that some of them intelligently suggest things for you. And every now and then they hit it out of the park and they make you listen to something new. And I do like that.
I agree. And, getting back to the earlier conversation we were having about the way people listen to their music and get their information, the iHeartRadios, the Pandoras, the Spotifys, these free services. I mean, you can upgrade, but they're free services, and you can go on your computer and put it in, and then you put in a suggestion. I want Frank Sinatra, so it's going to play in the vein of Frank Sinatra. I know that Joy, when she's at work, she listens to Adele. She loves Adele and a lot of those, English singers, and so, the Adele channel plays all of it, and that is a very interesting thing. It's a great algorithm as long as they've got a really good and deep selection of music to, draw from. And that's where it gets to be bad. If you listen to radio a lot, no matter if it's Spotify or iHeartRadio or any of it, it will repeat it if you're in the same, thing. If you say, play, top 40, well, you're going to get burnt out the first day. But if you put in there, play Barbra Streisand, well, it'll play Barbra Streisand and all the music that's sort of associated with her that's kind of in that same vein. But if you listen to it for more than like a day or two, you'll start hearing the same songs over and over. And then pretty soon you're going to hear the same songs over and over. Every once in a while, they'll rotate music in and out so that you can hear something new. But, I mean, that's the science of radio. I mean, it's always been that same science of radio. Wow. But I do listen to iHeartRadio and I do listen to Spotify and, because of what you just said about every once in a while, a gem will come up and you're like, what is this? And then you're introduced to new music and you're like, I'm going to go find out more about this. And
the key to finding them I found recently is on devices such as Alexa and things of that nature, and Amazon Music and things of that nature. But you can say, play songs like American Pie and see where it goes. And that's really neat. That's really neat. Because in 3 or 4 songs you find I'm still listening to this or I can't take this. And it takes you down a road and you start to think about the comparison between them. I never thought of that being the same, like when I listen to Dawes, I said, this is really like a young Jackson Brown. And I know he probably hates the comparison, but it really sounded like that in sound and lyrics. I'm a lyrics guy.
Yeah.
I'm a lyrics guy. I like lyrics. But I feel like I'm keeping you up too late.
No. I heard the dog. The dog was walking behind me. And I'm like, oh, and it was my wife. She was walking behind me as well.
Don't
That's why the dog. Now I can see. So, and she's not. Is she behind me still? No. She's not. No, we're good. I'm safe.
For now.
For a minute. Yeah, for a minute. Although she made me peanut butter cookies tonight, and they were delicious.
Oh,
what nice. A good one!
You guys have she's really taken on your your cooking thing, and you guys express your love through cooking. It's the way you say you love each other, I noticed.
That's one way. Absolutely. Although I can tell you, and it wouldn't be a secret, I met Joy 30 years ago, and she didn't cook much, but she learned how to cook, and she became a very good cook. But then she did something that most people can't do. She started baking. And my mother, being a chef, always told me the same thing, and it's true. Cooking is an art. You put a little of this, a little of that, a little of this, a little of that. You make something delicious, and you serve it. Baking is a science. Everything has to be measured properly. Temperatures have to be correct. Everything has to be measured precisely, like you're doing a chemistry experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, from basic cookies and stuff like that, and more difficult things, certain breads, things like that. Joy, when she started doing it, she would look at a cookbook and she'd just throw a recipe together, and she wasn't really paying much attention to how she was doing it. It came natural to her. And now that's what she does. She's an incredible baker. I mean, I'm her husband, and I've eaten her bakery before, and you can tell, and I'm very proud, of course, too, but she's very, very good.
Well, you can take a lot of credit for it, because I could say this without any ramifications. I know Joy's lineage in the kitchen, and it is not a strong one. It is not a good one. Anything you could do to salvage her was remarkable. I remember an incident, and she doesn't even know this story. I remember her mother was a weak cook, to say the least. And
I've heard.
She had made food, and it just – I'm not saying it was bad. I'm not saying it was good. It wasn't right. Something wasn't right. And I remember they had this little the kitchen was off a shed off the house, and her mother turned, and we threw the meat out the window. Like the Three Stooges, and we pretended we ate it. So later on that day, we leave and we go out the back door, and there's dogs and cats and everything, and the meat is still there in the alley. With dogs going by that you can see their ribs that are walking by the meat.
They won't even touch it. Oh, that's so funny.
And we knew that something was up, so that if you could find whatever was in her and get that spark going to make a cook out of her, anyone, you should teach it, because you can save anyone. If you could rescue her from her lineage in cooking, then you can rescue anyone.
Yeah, well, she's become a great cook, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful for everything. She is my rock. I wouldn't be around if it wasn't for her. And there you go. That's enough lovey-dovey stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you for talking and sharing.
Oh, Mark, it was my pleasure, man. You have a topic you want to talk about, you can always call on me.
We'll get you back again.
Cool. I look forward to it.
I'll let you know when this is going to air, and I'll let you get to bed.
All right, man. I appreciate it, Mark.
Have a good night.
Thanks, man. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.